Hello there and welcome to my guide on how to paint the Bretonnian Pegasus from Warhammer The Old World. First thing I've done is spray the models with a matte white spray. You'll notice the knights are not actually attached to the mounts. The reason for this is basically it's a lot easier to paint these guys without the riders on top. I'm going to deal with all that white first, so I'm going to mix some Basilcanum Grey with some contrast medium. I've done it so it's about a 6:1 ratio because I don't want the grey to be too dark. I just want it there just so it's a very subtle shade. Once that shade is dry, we're going to use matte white to dry brush all the feathers and the hair. Then we're going to move on to the shorter hair on the face and the rest of the body. For that we're going to use matte white again, but we're going to use thinner coats and we're going to do as many as we need to make that colour look nice and bright. Take your time with this. The best way to get a nice result with white is just basically care and patience. Using thinner coats helps build up the areas and gets a much smoother effect. Next I'm going to use a 50-50 mix of Lamia medium and Nuln oil to paint the muzzle of the horse. We're going to do a couple of coats, but we'll come back to that in a moment. While that coat dries, we're going to paint the chainmail at the back. We're going to use Iron Hand steel for that. Be very careful not to mess up all the white you've just painted there. We're now going to apply the second coat of the muzzle just to make that look a little bit darker. And then we'll use Nuln oil to wash the chainmail. Once that wash has dried, I'm going to start work on the cloth. So what I'm going to use is some corn red to paint in all the cloth areas. There's just going to be one base colour. There's going to be no variation in any of the models. These areas will then get washed with some Carroburg crimson. Once that wash is dry, I'm going to use corn red to neaten up any areas that the wash may have overly spilt or looks a bit too dark. Then I'm going to do a 50-50 mix of Wazdaka red and corn red to start the first highlight, followed by Wazdaka red just by itself for a more refined highlight. I then painted all the straps and the saddle with Dryad bark. That will all then get a coat with some Agrax Earthshade. Once this wash is dried, we're going to go back in and use Dryad bark to relayer, making sure we avoid any recesses. And then I'm going to use Catachan flesh to edge highlight all of the areas we've just painted. Next up, I'm going to use Iron Hand steel to paint the guards on their faces and the armour on their legs. I'm also going to paint their hooves as well. I'm then going to use Abaddon black to paint the main part of the hooves. All of these areas will then get a wash with some Nuln oil. While that dries, we're going to work on the livery. So we're going to draw a couple of lines just to draw the areas and mark out the actual cross hatching, and then we'll fill in the gaps. Don't worry if you make mistakes, we're going to go back over this area with black anyway, so we can tidy up there. Then I'm going to use a 50-50 mix of Mephiston Red and Evil Sun Scarlet to fill in the areas, leaving any areas that might show some shade. Then Evil Sun Scarlet for the first highlight. Then a 50-50 mix of Evil Sun Scarlet and Wild Rider Red, followed by Wild Rider Red just by itself. Next I'm going to use Retributor Armor Gold to paint all the areas on the armor that we haven't painted yet. That includes the bit on the nose and some of the shielding around the model. All of those areas will then get a wash with some Reichland flesh shade. Next we're going to finish off the livery with some Abaddon black. Once again, be very careful on this section. You want to try and be as neat as possible and try and get those lines as straight as you can. While the Abaddon black is out as well, I'm also going to use a very small brush to paint in the eyes. Then Corvus black will be used to paint the first highlight on the livery, followed by a 50-50 mix of Corvus black and Eshin grey. And then finally Eshin grey by itself to do the final edge highlight. Uruk Armor Gold will then be used to highlight the gold. And Stormhost Silver we use to highlight the silver. I'll also use it to pick out any rivets that are on any of the leather. The teeth will get a coat of Morghast bone. I'm also going to very carefully paint the tongue with some Screamer Pink. And the teeth will get highlighted with some Wraithbone. Then I've finished, so after that just add the transfers of your choice. And they are done. I'll be painting the riders in a separate video. Again, I paint them separately, so it's a lot easier to paint these guys. They're a really lovely set of old models, and if you picked them up, I hope you enjoyed painting them as much as I did. They didn't take long whatsoever. They only took around about 5 hours to get this far. I will finish the Knights off in a separate video. If you enjoyed watching this video and it helped you out and you want to see the second part, give us a thumbs up and a subscribe, and goodbye for now.